Hello, my name's Chris Thompson. I'm a concept artist from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Today we're going to be going through my design process as I create a somewhat unusual vehicle design in my program of choice, Blender. Let's get started. So, what I'm going to be doing in the background here is setting myself 1 hour to come up with a cool original design as I talk about my design process. Because I work quite extensively with Anderson Entertainment, I'm going down the Thunderbirds-esque kind of route by balancing a little bit of realistic grounded aesthetic while also making something kinda out there and spacey. This particular idea is based on old Russian ekranoplans, which is sort of like seaplanes that can use their specifically shaped wings to fly really fast and low over the ocean. I'm taking that idea and mixing it a bit with some of the old Seacat car ferries that used to sail into Belfast when I was a kid. This is probably going to end up rather bizarre and unwieldy. Who knows what it'll end up looking like? I do. I'm recording this after. So, anyway. I'm an all-round creative artist, animator, writer, graphic designer, and generally whatever the immediate situation requires me to be, because the industry is competitive and YouTube is a great teacher. You might have already seen some of my work for Anderson Entertainment or my animated trailers for Big Finish's Doctor Who series. Most recently, you may have seen some of my designs go live for the new series of Terrorhawks. So, while we're talking Jerry Anderson in general, let's talk inspirations. These old shows made a huge impact on me as a kid, and designers like Bob Bell, Derek Meddings, Mike Trim, Steve Begg, Brian Johnson, and Dominic Lavery very much have gone on to inform the kind of work I do today. And one of the biggest parts of that is the stuff that they've designed. Besides being awesome, is being able to bridge that real-world aesthetic that lets you feel that these things could exist in the real world. For me, when I'm initially given a brief, that's sort of where I start. If someone's like, Chris, design a submarine, I'll go look at submarines, and then my second thought is how to make it look absolutely rad. A good example of this is Stingray. You look at Stingray, and you see the traditional conning tower, torpedo tubes, and propeller or contra-rotating anti-torque eddy damper. But it also looks nothing like a submarine from 1964, because it's covered in compound curves and cool fins. Still looks like it could work though, and honestly, still looks futuristic today. I tackled a similar problem with this design for Gemini Force 1. This is the Pisces, a large rescue submarine that's designed to rescue other downed submarines. Obviously, it needed to be a lot bigger than Stingray, so what I did was flip the familiar silhouette and give it this massive underslung moon pool. I took a bit of inspiration from the real-world Project Azoran, with the large grab section that's designed to lift crashed submarines. Let's see how past Chris is getting on here. Well, he's got the shape down, and I do love a bit of negative space with that fin. The idea I'm trying to work with is that the craft can be loaded from a door in the back, and then once it reaches its target, it can beach itself and offload its cargo from the front, kinda like a landing craft. Pretty cool, right? Maybe. Yeah. Gonna put a big obnoxious sized engine in that arched fin. I want it to feel powerful, and also, that's not the obvious place to put it. That sort of brings me to the slightly more difficult side of concept design, coming up with new ideas. Particularly when designing a plane or a space fighter, I find it really tricky to come up with something that doesn't look like something else. Space fighters are particularly frustrating, seeing as they can look pretty much like anything, and yet somehow when finding a new shape, that's where the imposter syndrome sets in. One solution I'm reasonably proud of is this guy I made for the Terrorhawks audio series. The Tomahawk is basically an extension of the existing technology of the show, with a captured alien engine. The actual design of the craft's main body is this relatively standard fare, with a standard delta shape, but I'm really proud of having the cockpit slung in this aft section, kinda like you're riding the craft like a chariot. My logic for this is that should there be an emergency, this part can just drop off, letting the other half fly off and ruin someone's day. I feel like that makes sense, right? Someone else who was clearly having the same issue was Derek Meddings. By the time he got to UFO, he was clearly trying to push the boundaries of what an aircraft or a spacecraft should look like, so he came up with this thing. The Shadow Lunar Shuttle. As weird as it looks, I like it. It doesn't lose the feeling like it could work, but funnily enough, SpaceX started doing the same thing like 40 years later. 51 years later, however, past Chris appears to be questioning his life choices. You keep going, my man, says you from 2 hours in the future. On a serious note, I'm pretty sure all artists, no matter what medium they work in, hit the "this is terrible" stage of the design process. And I almost get it every single time. Just push through and try new things. Here I move the wings further back, and boom, I'm back in the zone. I have talked quite a bit about realism, so I think at this point it's important to mention that I am not a scientist and I have no formal training. And, if you follow any of my art, you'll probably find a bunch of people in the comments pointing that out. That said, these things I design don't actually have to work. A good design ideally serves to inspire, while not breaking the immersion for the viewer. I find that the best designers know how to balance the cool realism scale, and can get away with sticking a hollowed out tail fin with a gaping hole through it that wouldn't work in atmosphere or space on the back of a space fighter. Derek. Only joking. You're awesome, dude. The main reason I'm bringing this up is that when I was a beginner, I constantly zigzagged up and down this scale, and I would get a lot of comments listing all the scientific inaccuracies in my work, and it could be quite demotivating if you really worked hard on something. The truth is, as an artist or designer, you need to demonstrate your range and show that you have a grasp of the scientific and the fantastical. And if someone wants to complain your spaceship doesn't have enough reverse thrust, show them an X-Wing and move on. Here's a fun little design that I made years ago, with some fun spinning repulsor things. Look at him go, living his best life. Back to the Acronoplan, I'm adding some superficial details to add some completely arbitrary va-va-voom. It's worth pointing out that at this stage, this isn't exactly how I would model a finished design. This is more a rough blocking out model I would use to show a client an example direction. As everything is pretty low detail, I can play fast and loose with the design, adding more negative space and the occasional greeble. If you want to see how I would design something with a high level of detail, let me introduce you to Dalek Stanley, the stained glass Dalek. This was a project I put together for the Mad Lads over a big finish for the cover of Order of the Daleks, a Sixth Doctor story that required a radical redesign of the Daleks. I put Stanley together over the course of 2 weeks, using reference from local churches, and bouncing back and forth between director Jamie Anderson. There's so much going on, I ended up doing much of the detail using normal and bump maps, otherwise there would have been no way I could have made the deadline. He's gone on to be one of the more successful things I've put together. Here I am trying a few different colour schemes and messing around a bit with the craft livery. As much as a myriad of colours would look cool, maybe grey is a pretty safe bet on this one. Just a few more fins and bits and pieces to add, and voila, you have a reimagined piece of outdated Russian engineering. While I completely appreciate it's a weird looking thing, I'm quite fond of how the top engine hangs over the craft, hopefully giving it that fast standing still look. What I would now do if this was for a client is put together a turntable animation and send it across. I'd then get notes back in return suggesting amendments, or my P45. We would then move forward with the design and probably make a newer, more detailed model. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this little insight into my design process. If you want to see more of this sort of thing, or if you want to demand that I stop directly, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of Brit Sci-Fi.